Hello and welcome to another episode of Crypto Bytes. In 2009, a guy named James Howells established himself as a visionary. He began mining Bitcoin long before anybody else had heard of it. James was able to accumulate 7,500 Bitcoins for a fraction of a penny each coin. His girlfriend eventually forced him to quit. She worried the mining computer was becoming, quote, too loud. James eventually threw the hard disk in the garbage. This blunder has already cost him more than $400 million.
But to get your money, you would need that hard drive.
Yeah, there's a specific file on that hard drive called a wallet file, which the Bitcoin is stored in. And without that file, there is no way of getting the money back because there is no central server that records a log of it.
In 2010, Laszlo Hanex paid 10,000 Bitcoin or around $35 for 2 pizzas. It wasn't the first Bitcoin transaction, but it was likely the most highly discussed at the time. Unfortunately, these delectable pizzas now cost them $500 million.
Is it true some people celebrate the anniversary of the day you bought the pizza?
Yeah, May 22nd, Bitcoin Pizza Day. So
it's called Bitcoin Pizza Day?
It is.
Stories like these are what make Bitcoin such an intriguing phenomena. Its growth and adoption have been astounding in recent years. But the origins of Bitcoin are as fascinating. Despite Bitcoin's youth in comparison to traditional sources of wealth, the basic concepts behind cryptocurrency may be older than you believe. So the issue is, where did Bitcoin truly come from? Who is the enigmatic figure who created it? Many people still regard Bitcoin as a fad, a Ponzi scheme that will vanish as fast as it appeared. The cryptocurrency has a poor image due to phony crypto scams like BitConnect and OneCoin, as well as payment for drugs on the Silk Road.
What's happening is there's all these copycat cryptocurrencies that are going out there, and there's no regulation on the actual level of Bitcoin itself. You're talking, there's futures regulation, but the underlying asset is completely unregulated. It's a dark market.
Bitcoin is worthless artificial gold, which, if it succeeded, would facilitate a lot of illicit activity.
People are beginning to look at our economic system with increasing skepticism. Currency is constantly being created. Food prices and bond yields are rising, hinting at inflation. And knowing that the long-term value of all fiat currencies over the last few thousand years has tended toward zero, it's only natural to think that there may be some issues ahead. Friedrich Hayek, winner of the 1974 Nobel Prize in Economics, stated the following in 1984, quote, "I don't believe we shall ever have a good money again. Before we take the thing out of the hands of the government, all we can do is by some sly roundabout way introduce something that they can't stop." End quote. While Bitcoin is undeniably imperfect, it broadly achieves this goal, and as you'll soon see, it can't be stopped. For those who are new, here's a quick summary. When you pay using a bank card at the store checks with the bank to determine whether you have enough money to make the purchase. The bank examines its records, confirms that you have sufficient funds, and deducts that amount from your card. It then updates its records and charges a fee for its services. Who would you trust to maintain the records straight if you wanted to eliminate the banks from the system? No changing or cheating. Nobody would ever put their faith in a single individual with so much authority. However, you may place your faith in a group of individuals. In reality, several millions. The fundamental concept is to avoid keeping a centralized record of transactions. Many copies of the transactions have been disseminated worldwide. Every transaction is recorded by the owner of each copy. Instead of verifying with banks, the business in this new model analyzes everyone's records to determine if you have the money. When a purchase is made, all record keepers' records are updated. If a single transaction record is fraudulent, it does not accord with the rest of the transaction data and is rejected. This enormous number of individuals scrutinizing record transactions is actually a network of computers. Third parties like as banks are unnecessary since the decentralized network regulates itself. Because payments are sent directly between people, there are no prohibitions, server shutdowns, or payment blocking. Transactions can be traced, but they cannot be halted. Miners maintain the network by solving difficult equations on their computers. These individuals mine Bitcoin in pieces known as blocks, which include all of the most recent transactions. Blocks are similar to pages in a record book. Miners are compensated in Bitcoin for their effort, same to how gold miners are compensated. Bitcoin, like gold, has a limited quantity to prevent it from being depreciated, as now happening with the fiat currencies. There can never be more than 21 million Bitcoins, and the last one will be mined in 2140. So what gives Bitcoin its value? In fact, anything is only worth the price if someone is prepared to pay for it. So if trust is lost, might the price go to zero? Yes, that is achievable. Regardless, it's an intriguing concept. One may argue that the value of Bitcoin stems from the confidence and utility of the Bitcoin network itself. Nobody knows what the cost of such value is.
So yeah, I think a really useful idea. A blockchain is just a type of database. It's a distributed ledger that in some use cases, like for a banking back office, is kind of like a database upgrade. So massive improvements in efficiency, but probably not that transformative or disruptive. When you take a blockchain, you make it public and decentralized, and then you add money to that, you add a cryptocurrency, then you're looking at something that is that first use case, that offshore banking system that I think is fundamentally disruptive, and disruptive financially, economically, and even potentially politically.
So how is Bitcoin kept running? Because Bitcoin is open source, anybody may modify the code. It is a common fallacy that the code has remained unchanged for the previous 10 years. Maintenance is performed to guarantee proper operation. This is accomplished through the use of a Bitcoin Improvement Proposal, or BIP. A BIP is just a text that suggests fundamental changes. To prevent someone from introducing code that says, for example, give every Cold Fusion viewer 1,000 Bitcoin, there must be 95% unanimity among the past 2,000 miners. It's essentially a computerized voting mechanism. The first block of Bitcoin was mined on January 3, 2009. A particular message was inserted within the first block. It read, quote, "The Times, 3rd of January 2009. Chancellor on the verge of second bailout for banks," end quote. This gives us a clue to Bitcoin's purpose for existing as a response to a broken financial system. It was completed just 9 days after the first block was mined. It was between Bitcoin's creator Satoshi Nakamoto and another cryptographic enthusiast, Hal Finney. It was a healthy sum of Bitcoin, worthless at the time. On a cryptography email group, Satoshi Nakamoto would proclaim the creation of a new economic system. Hal Finney would assist Satoshi to repair issues and increase security in the early days of July 9, 2009. While these steps signal the genesis of Bitcoin and the first instance of use, they are far from the end of the narrative. To do so, we must go back almost 2 decades to the year 1983. American cryptographer David Charm is already toying with the concept of electronic currency in 1983. He was a member of the cypherpunks movement. There were some activists who championed the concept of utilizing cryptography and computers as a powerful instrument to safeguard people's privacy. To put it in political words, they were similar to digital libertarians. David desired a more secure and anonymous transaction mechanism. His work resulted in the development of the blind signature process, laying the groundwork for what would become recognized as the present blockchain technological basis.
I created a concept for how you could use the mixing to have perfect privacy in who you talk to, and eCash to make your payments, and then the blind signatures could be used to basically prove things about you without revealing who you are. And so, like, classic, say if a kid's at a bar and they want to, or somewhere they want to get in, they want to say to prove that they're old enough, or they have a driving license, or they're from a different state or whatever, but they don't want to give their address and all this other stuff. Well, that's what you could do with a credential mechanism.
David Chan began developing his concept of a practical cryptographic electronic money system in the years that followed. In 1989, the startup DigiCash was founded. Cryptographer Nick Szabo was a renowned DigiCash employee. Nick went on to become a key figure in the early crypto sector, but more on him later. DigiCash released its eCash system in 1993, a product that allowed for the safe and anonymous transmission of money over the internet. eCash was David's response to what he saw as the exceedingly risky habit of using credit cards online. Insiders at the time described eCash as a technically excellent solution that eliminated many of the problems associated with credit card payments, such as security concerns and costs. Despite his noble intentions, David's actions were perilous at the time because the United States, the government, detected a threat.
A number of my colleagues and friends had secrecy order placed on them by the United States government, which made it a federal crime to reveal what they were researching. That makes a certain amount of sense to me, I guess. But to apply that to cryptography seemed a bit out of range. The National Security Agency, which is our main cryptographic authority in the United States, for protecting secrets and breaking codes, they got a new director, and this fellow came in and he started writing letters to all the scientific associations telling them that they should not have conferences or even sessions at conferences that covered cryptography. I felt it was just too important, so I risked spending the rest of my life in jail to set cryptography free.
Early crypto aficionados had to hide code through clothing or tattoos, since digital cryptography was so frowned upon. The eCash product, like Bitcoin, quickly gained a lot of interest from purchasers. David Charm was called by none other than Bill Gates at the height of the hoopla. Gates intended to include eCash in every copy of Windows 95. He allegedly offered $100 million for the project. David Charm turned down the offer as well as any subsequent offers. Ex-employees claimed that David's rigidity and paranoia made it difficult for him to trust the motives of those who were interested. He also expected that better offers would be forthcoming. He desired eCash to be flawless. He believed in the importance of his work. In 1996, he stated, quote, "The difference between bad electronic cash system and a well-developed digital cache will determine whether we have a dictatorship or a real democracy," end quote. David eventually lost control of DigiCash due to infighting, and the firm was taken over by outside investors. DigiCash began presenting its goods to banks, with a number of them showing interest. However, the great majority of banks at the time were cautious, preferring profitable credit cards over an experimental offering. DigiCash went bankrupt in 1998, heralding the end of the first wave of digital money. It appeared that the world was just not ready for electronic crypto money. However, this did not prevent progressive thinkers from finding possibilities in the concept. After all, it wasn't the concept that was flawed, it was just ahead of its time, with the added disadvantage of a lack of strong leadership. Famous economist Milton Friedman even stated in 1999 that, quote, "Electronic cash was required for the newly discovered internet and was also a sensible instrument for preventing government expansion."
So that I think that the internet is going to be one of the major forces for reducing the role of government. The one thing that's missing, but that will soon be developed, is a reliable eCash, a method whereby on the internet you can transfer funds from A to B without A knowing B or B knowing A.
He would go on to propose that the monetary supply and monetary policy should be determined by a computer so that people cannot corrupt it. In the mid-1990s, the industry blossomed with enterprises based on a cryptographic money, all riding the wave of interest caused by DigiCash. Even the NSA joined in on the fun in 1996. They issued a paper titled, quote, "How to Make a Mint Anonymous Electronic Cash Encryption," end quote. They outlined their own version of the money, but also advocate the necessity for a centralized bank to maintain track of transaction records, which ran directly against the movement's core values. The movement continued, and soon some new ideas began to emerge on message boards. Some of these concepts were extremely helpful to what would eventually become Bitcoin. B, for example, was created by a University of Washington graduate student and released in 1998. B money was created to let internet economies to function completely free of external regulation. B money was ultimately theoretical, and while it was popular, it never gained traction enough to become a reality. Other suggestions from the internet community were less helpful. Consider Jim Bell's article on assassination politics. In the article, he recommended an encrypted payment system for citizens who were dissatisfied with their political representatives. Money might be secretly given to a pool until it was large enough for someone to take the reward and kill a politician. It was a thought that finally led to Bell doing time in prison. In the midst of all of this commotion, ex-DigiCash employee Nick Szabos's 1998 proposal for BitGold sticks out the most. Instead of a digital currency being a token that reflects fiat money, Nick proposed that the digital currency itself be a valuable commodity that would be paid to miners for solving cryptographic equations. Does this sound familiar? Where BitGold differs from previous initiatives is its total lack of dependency on banks. Nick Szabo explains, quote, "I was trying to mimic as closely as possible in cyberspace the security and trust characteristics of gold, and chief among those is that it doesn't depend on a trusted central authority," end quote. If David Charm's eCash was an ancestor of Bitcoin, BitGold was the missing connection. Although it was an important foundation for the future of cryptocurrencies, it was merely theoretical and incorrect. For one thing, it was less concerned with privacy and had significant technological flaws when it came to mining. BitGold, like B-Money, was never extensively accepted. So despite its amazing advancement, the cryptographic money community remained rather quiet for a decade. The domain name bitcoin.org was then registered anonymously in August 2008. In October, Satoshi Nakamoto submitted a paper titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system to a cryptography email group. Nakamoto presented the world with the core framework for Bitcoin in this article. As things now stand, this publication triggered a cryptographic chain reaction that altered the path of financial history. Nation governments are already attempting to launch their own digital currencies. Miami wants residents to be allowed to pay bills with Bitcoin.
to be able to offer our employees to get a percentage of their salary in Bitcoin, allows our residents to pay for fees in Bitcoin, and also would allow for taxes to be paid in Bitcoin. It also a request of the state legislature to make Bitcoin an acceptable currency for us to potentially invest in the future.
Bitcoin is now accepted by PayPal, MasterCard, and Apple Pay. Tesla has purchased $1.5 billion in Bitcoin, while General Motors is considering placing Bitcoin on its financial sheet. Large financial institutions are now taking Bitcoin exposure. The solution to the double spending problem distinguished Bitcoin from previous attempts. Digital money, unlike real repositories of value, is merely data, and data can be reproduced, and thus permits the possibility of a single coin to be used numerous times. In the past, this issue was managed by introducing a trusted third party to supervise transactions. In the case of eCash, that third party was banks. But to Nakamoto, that negated the objective, and as much as Nick Szabo attempted with BitGold, the aim with Bitcoin was to establish, quote, a system for electronic transactions without relying on trust, end quote. As previously explained, Bitcoin was successful in addressing the double spending problem by creating an updated record of who owns what and when. The blockchain was created and implemented during this time. After the double spending issue was resolved, the system was put online and tested, and it functioned. Bitcoin was operational by 2009. It began trading in July 2010 at $0.0008 and had grown to $0.08 by the end of the month. But of course, no one cared. The very first Reddit post on Bitcoin in 2010 may be seen here. The first time Bitcoin was mentioned on television was in the 2012 episode of Good Wife, when the price of Bitcoin was $3.41.
I went online and I bought 1 Bitcoin last night.
Really? It's the future.
I don't know. It didn't feel real.
Oh, real's gonna change. Just watch.
In 2013, I gave a seminar about Bitcoin to an empty room. Nobody here cared when it was $100.
Neutrality in Bitcoin means being able to adopt Bitcoin in any culture, any language, any religion, any geography.
However, there were some believers, as Chamath Palapitaya discusses his thoughts on Bitcoin at $135.
Owning that currency and allowing water to find its level, particularly in the developing markets, is huge. And if you don't think that this thing is going to rip, when Brazil goes through a devaluation, when the Indian rupee continues to get crushed, when you have all of this money trying to get in and out of these countries where there's massive, political instability or monetary or financial instability, you're being naive. It doesn't matter what happens in the United States. It doesn't matter what happens in Japan. It doesn't matter what happens in the EU. It doesn't matter. It matters what happens in Argentina, in Venezuela, in Kenya, in Brazil, in India, in Russia, in China. And when you look at where all the activity is, it's in all of those markets.
Yep.
This will be born out of a people's desire to have unfettered access to capital.
Despite eventually discovering the secret to a workable electronic payment system, Satoshi Nakamoto unexpectedly elected to remain entirely unknown on April 26, 2011. Satoshi still possesses 1 million coins that have never left his digital wallet. If the price of Bitcoin reaches $197,000, he would be the world's richest person. Because Satoshi Nakamoto is such an enigmatic character, he has encouraged conjecture and false accusations. Who is Satoshi and why did he disappear? In the upcoming episode, we'll go through this as well as some worries regarding Bitcoin, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching Crypto Bytes, your daily crypto news source. We'll see you in the next one.